Quite often, creating change means that you are working in the present day, but you're actually working in the future.
The Theater of Refusal was less known at the time, but that's an exhibition that has gained momentum.
The system of refusal made it easy to ignore black artists. First thing I did was think about writing an article. Nobody heard of me, so who would print an article for me? And so I thought, well, I would have a better chance dealing with the idea in an exhibition. What is the visual of an exhibition going to look like? And one of the components that was important to me is that I wanted to make this point that these writers were marginalizing the work of minority artists or artists of color.
So what's fantastic about the way that Charles is working is that not only has he invited in Ellen Tani as a co-curator, somebody again from the new generation, but he's also reconsidering the structure and the approach that he was taking when he did the first version, which was all about mainstream criticism.
Our relationship began as a discourse, as a dialogue. And I think that is manifesting really beautifully in this exhibition because Theater of Refusal was very much about bringing a critical perspective to an existing discourse and engaging in dialogue with an intergenerational group of artists. Theater of Refusal in 1993 was developed as an invitation. He had been thinking about how postmodern theory fails black artists.
And what Kate, she was envisioning that we would present a new Theater of Refusal and structure it around what we thought were the salient events of today.
The original show, the way I describe it in shorthand, was a critique of art criticism. It's an exhibition that's a critique of art criticism. And in 2023, we don't see art criticism behaving in that way. Art criticism is no longer, exclusively the domain of white authors.
Getting invited to Theater of Refusal felt, at that early point in my career, like a gift. I still think back at that moment and can feel deeply what it meant to be sitting in a space of tradition, of radical thought in action. And so being at theater reinforced what it meant to work with purpose and passion towards goals and ends that perhaps were not apparent always to others.
I had this strong sports background, and one of the things that I was trained to do was to never get too high on your highs and never get too low on your lows, and don't let criticism, you have to kind of develop this exoskeleton that a positive review isn't going to define you, and a negative review isn't going to define you either. It was more about finding your own place in those instances, those images, those moments, that you have to kind of question your own kind of placement in that. So there was that conceptual layer to the work that was intentional. And, I was fortunate that my teeth were cut by folks, conceptual artists that, that sense of economy that I'm talking about was really whittled down to the important parts.
Artists of color and the sort of historically marginalized artists are very much the center of attention. And the discourse at hand within the art world, by and large, and within the world, has a lot to do with questions of decolonization. Diversification of the art world seems to be a sign of progress in the decolonial project. But, what are artists asked to, pressured to, allowed to do and say about that project? So with abstraction doesn't offer an easy reference point or clear evidence or citation of colonialism's legacy. But what it does offer is a way out, a way forward. Historically, abstraction gives that to artists. It's a way of embedding ideas of the self in a language that's not tethered to self-representation or figuration.
The ethics of life, the aesthetics of art, are in a continual spirit of vision and revision. You cannot opt out of it because you are part of the problem even when you think you have the solution. This is not my home. My home was prettier, it was more welcoming. But why does my key fit the lock? That's the threshold that artists, poets, writers, who see quite clearly the structural, systemic problems of our society, but accept that responsibility of where they are, both to understand and represent this ambivalence. This is not my home, but I can't run away from it. Artists take on that challenge and that resistance. And I think this is as true of their aesthetics as it is of their social ethics. That the past is not dead and the past is not another country. The past is an invitation to cross borders into our own time and work with these issues. And one of the things that struck me as a continuity between the curators in the 90s and these remarkable curators today, the work is a threshold that engages you, that invites you, the way to think through the mind of the curator into the world of the creator.